What's going on, y'all? Welcome to the latest episode of Can I Kick It? This is your host, Eliar, and is joining me is the super agent herself, Miss Maggie Ntim. Did I say your last name right? Please, I pray I did.
You did. You did. No, you did.
Shanair
Nitim
owed me
Intim.
$5 because we had a bet.
Still Nitim Intim. Still. It's all good.
All right, that works. So let me ask you, Maggie, how did you fall in love with, like, I don't know how to say it, fall in love with the game of soccer, and like how did you happen to become an agent?
Yeah. So
Because
I
that's
mean,
interesting to me.
of course, and especially like a lot of people say that, especially when they learn more about my background, they're like, "Wait a minute, how you go from like music and working with like Nas and 50 Cent to working with soccer players?" And the funny thing about it is the common denominator is I have a passion for it all. So I started out, loving the sport from a young age. More so was playing basketball first at like the age of 4. I grew up in Queens, New York, Jamaica, Queens. So soccer wasn't really a thing in my neighborhood. It was basketball or you played American football. And unless, because it was predominantly Caribbean, African, neighborhood, we loved, soccer because that was like first nature to us, as far as our background and stuff. So watching it was always something, and maybe every now and then have to kick around a ball, like a basketball, because I couldn't afford to get a soccer ball. So that was kind of how I first fell in love with it. And then, of course, just watching it over the years. And then throughout my career, I was, working in music, working for a couple of record labels, and then went over to MSG and started getting more into sports. Well, MSG is Madison Square Garden in New York, for those that do know, the world famous arena.
I will hope everybody knows what the Mecca is.
Some people don't, but that's the place, and that those are the initials basically. And so starting there and doing that, and then went on to start doing some other sports stuff within baseball, American football, the NFL. And then finally when I got to Coca-Cola is when I was able to really get experience working with soccer, because I had to manage 2 accounts, which happened to be FIFA and MLS. So that was a perfect way for me to learn more about it from the business side, as well as see it from the full, lens. And while I was working on the World Cup and was down in everything, and I was like, man, there's a lot of players, but there's a huge lack of representation amongst African Americans, amongst men and women of color that are representing these players. And if they did have certain agents, it was their family members. So I said, okay, I've always had this dream to want to be an agent, and it always had to be within soccer or baseball, but preferably soccer. And I said, you know what, this might be a challenge, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it and see what happens from there. So I started reaching out to some agents who I knew, and they kind of gave me the it's gonna be tough and all of that.
Yeah.
But on my discover, I was noticing that I wasn't coming across any African American female agents in the U.S. I think maybe like one I came across in England. So I was like, okay, there's a huge lack in that area. And then especially in the USA, I couldn't find any black female soccer agents. And I came across like 1 or 2 male here in the States. And then overseas, there were a couple. So I said, okay, there's no women. I couldn't even find a Latina woman. I was like, I barely could even find a Caucasian woman agent. So I was like, all right, there's a huge need for this. And then I started to look deeper. And then when it was time to go to the Women's World Cup, I was like, all right, there's a huge lack of representation, because the women, most of the popular women footballers had males as their agents. And I was like, okay, there's nothing wrong with it. But I was like, wait, this is crazy. This is crazy.
I shouldn't be
So
shocked because of that. Because I mean, like for
it's
myself,
crazy. It's
yeah,
crazy because it's way too many. And I felt like, it's hard to be something that you can't see. But
that's
I felt like
100% true.
I felt like I've always been in that position where everything that I aspired to be, it was very hard to find someone that kind of fit the mold, because I was like just a different
Mhm.
kid growing up, just different. I wanted to do like 10 things in one, and everybody's like, you can't do it. But I'm like, I'm going to do it. So that's kind of why I call myself the Jackie of all trades. So I was like, man, I already got my business going. I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm going to go through this process and become an agent. And the worst I could do is fail at it, but at least I could say I tried. And so I then went through the process as far as getting licensed. And then throughout that process, I started working with a couple of athletes directly, where I got the chance to work with Kylian Mbappe, Jadon Sancho on some marketing campaigns. And I was like, all right, this is what I do, but now imagine on the field and what that looks like. And so I went through the process, and earlier this year, I got my license, and I became a FIFA and USSF agent.
Wow.
And then my first player that I signed, like
Mhm.
on a full service level, from off the field to on the field, was Hugh Roberts, Charlotte Independence. So
The guy that we interviewed for our last
yep,
podcast. So it's all coming full
yep.
circle now.
Yep. So I signed Hugh, and then I signed Samantha Johnson from Utah Royals. She was my first women footballer, and then I ended up acquiring players like Jamia Fields, Abby Alinsky, Ashley Plumtree from Leicester City. I have a couple more girls that's coming within the NWSL draft, so you'll hear about them next year when they go pro. And then a couple of men as well on the MLS side that are going to be going to the MLS. So,
okay, then. So before we hop into more of that and more of the questions we got you, I gotta ask this question. Me growing up as an early 2000 kids, I listened to 50 Cent Jr. and all that stuff. Were you around for that era? Like for the Ting Talk? Like were you involved in that? Because if you so, I need to know.
From the early days?
Yeah, like Lloyd Banks, all of them.
So the funny part is we come from the same neighborhood. My cousin started working with 50 first, and one of my uncle's best friends. So I've known them personally to where like they were in my grandmother's house. My grandmother's house was like the house to be because everybody's like, "Baby, taste her food." My uncle's a celebrity barber, so he cuts hair. So I grew up seeing like all those guys from 50, Nas, Mobb Deep. I lived 2 blocks from Steve Stout. So he was at my house on a regular. He taught me a lot about marketing and branding and just, as a person, what to do in this business and how to navigate, as well as even being around 50 and those guys. And I wasn't a part of the early stages, but I was a part of that reunion. When they made that reunion in 2014, yes, I was the happiest woman in the world. Another dream of mine was to have Nas and 50 on the same stage, and that happened in 2014, and I was happy to be a part of that. As they all know, I'm a huge fan of both artists. They're both like 2 of my favorite rappers, and we all just happen to come from Queens. So, it's one of those things. I was like, all right, this is good. This is good business right here.
Oh yeah, that's 100% good business. When you can get those 2 together and not like have anyone get messed up in the process, it works out great.
Listen, I can't say what happened. I mean, listen, that show in particular just happened to be Queens, but people are like, man, that Summer Jam was interesting. I said, yeah, but there were a lot of non-Queens people on that stage, and when you start to have the mixtures of Queens and the Brooklyns and the Harlems, and you got all those personalities and entourage of people, something's gonna happen.
Look, I got family from up there. I believe you. I got family up that way in New York, and they all tell me like it's like 10 different cities mixed into one. So I totally understand.
And just imagine the personalities. Like you got Queens and Brooklyn are more like Bronx and Harlem are more like Harlem is not even a borough. It's really in Manhattan, but they just consider it as like its own city. And then you got Staten Island. That's just like the forgotten child, and Long Island too. It's like the forgotten place. So it gets interesting, but I got love for them all. I got love for everybody, man. Everybody from New York, California, Atlanta. I mean, I live between New York and the South, so mainly like Charlotte and Atlanta. So I got love for all the places.
Yeah, that's what's up. So back to the players you managed, like you said, Hugh Roberts, and we know Hugh to be a player that is very outspoken. One of the first, I would say, in my opinion, one of the first USL players that really use his platform on the level of that of LeBron James. He might not get the same notoriety, but what he's doing is on the same level of LeBron James in my eyes. How is it for you being the agent of a player like that and knowing how very few soccer players in America use their platform and what's, the backlash that could come from it, the backlash that we've seen, of course, over the course of the summer? What kind of advice would you give your players, or how do you help your players navigate that kind of tricky, using your platform to not only speak about what you feel and what you see, but also using it in a way where it doesn't hinder the player that they can't sign for another team?
So anybody that knows me knows I'm very outspoken. So when people see the players that I represent, like Hugh, Samantha, Johnson, for example, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is a perfect match because y'all are just alike." You know, we're all outspoken. We're very vocal, and we feel strongly about representation within the sport of soccer. So with Hugh and what he's doing, as well as my other player that I represent, Brandon Miller, who's also a partner with Hugh, and they started the USL Black Players Alliance. I'm support them 100%. I think with the current climate that we're in and what we've experienced just this year and just overall, the number one goal that I wanted my players to know is that I'm here for you no matter what, and I'm always going to stand by you. I'll tell you if you're wrong, but I'm still going to support you. And if you're right, I'm still going to support you. I think the biggest thing with that is, as an agent, it does make things a little bit different versus the standard agent, because before I'm an agent, I'm a Black woman. Mm-hmm. And so I can totally relate. So if they're kneeling, I know why they're kneeling. I feel when they're protesting, I've been there, because I myself have been racially profiled. I sometimes get it just being an agent now. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's crazy, because some may say, well, I'd give up. And I'm like, no, because this is bigger than just a Black or white. This is about making a difference for the men and women of color, making sure that their voices are heard, making sure that they're getting they're getting treated fairly on the pitch and off the pitch. And it's not just for the current climate of what we see, where it's like, oh yeah, diversity this, diversity that. No, let's keep talking this 10 years down the line. Let's start implementing everything that we need to implement, and don't let it be just because of George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor. It has to be bigger than that. It's because deep down inside you want to do that. So when Hugh comes to me and says, I'm protesting for this, I'm never going to tell him don't do it. Mm-hmm. I may just advise him and say, understand the consequences, or better yet, I say, let's take a different approach. Let's communicate with the league. If you want to do something like create a Players Alliance or a coalition, as soon as my guys told me what they wanted to do, I said, let's go to the league. I'd be more than happy to call who I need to call at USL, or if you guys want to do it, go ahead. Let's talk to the league. And when they did that, look at what happened. It created a great support system. The USL, for the first time, you've seen that, where the league has the players to back 100%. They support everything. And change already has been made within that league, and I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it was kind of cool to see how the USL kind of you see it sometimes with some leagues where they'll have this coalition or something, but they'll kind of latch onto it like, hey, we created this. Mm-hmm. Where USL was like, hey, they created this. We're here to help uplift it and kind of spread it out. So that was great to see.
We had the calls, like we were on the calls, and some people were like, wait, what's she doing on this? She an agent. Like, you ain't supposed to be in here. I'm like, look, this is not about signing players. This is about supporting my players and all the players, even the ones I don't represent. And I just let them know, like, if you're going to do it too, the USL is it's the largest league in America. And if you're going to do it, you want to include League One and League Two. Don't exclude them from it. Don't just make it championship, but it's exactly what it is. It's USL. And when they did that, I mean, I damn near shed a tear, because to see the guys from League One now feel like, okay, these guys that are in the championship level are like my older brothers. These are guys that like we aspire to be in their position. And before, we never really made any connection to communicate with each other. But now they're all connected. They're all connected. Yeah. Even guys that play within the championship level, some may never really have spoken to Hugh before, but now all the players have connected. Even down to, some staff that may work within some of these teams, their front office, they've all just come together, and it's just beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, it's great to see. It was something, because before, like when it came to League One and Championship, I mean, of course, there's no promotion relegation, so there was no overlap, and it was really the first year of League One. I think we're in the second or third year of League Two, but it was like you said, there's no
Mm-hmm.
overlap. But to see how they have used the USL Black Players Alliance to really embrace all of that, and like couple like being here in Richmond, having talking to like Ivan Magales and Kawase and other players that have joined the US, they're just like, man, it's a great resource. Even if like I decide not to be a soccer player anymore, it's not like I get deterred away from the resource. You know, it's still like it's pretty much like a mentoring thing. And I think that's something that a lot of soccer players that we don't talk about a lot, because it's like it's very different than how it is in England and other countries, where it's like you're kind of just thrown into it. It's kind of like you're figuring out on your own and you don't know what to do. But now you're finding these resources coming together. You have someone that's been through the struggle with you. They know what to do, and it's helping everyone out. It's making everyone a better person for it.
I say it all the time. In a couple of years, USL definitely has that potential to be like that top league. I mean, when we talk about talent, there are definitely some talented players. I think culture-wise, to me, I'm gonna just be honest. When we're talking about culture, I feel like USL players have a little bit more culture than a couple other leagues. I mean, y'all can get mad at me or hate me or block me or whatever on social. I don't care. I'm just speaking my opinion. From a culture side, if you look at like Richmond, for example, if you look at Forward Madison, like what they're, you know what I'm saying? Like just New Mexico, like the culture is there. And I think that's something that as a whole, US soccer just needs to work on culturally, because obviously when we look at these other leagues, because it's not going to be like basketball and the NFL or even baseball for that matter, but it can definitely get there at some point, you know, if we all come together at least. So
Most definitely. Well, just staying on the point of the, you know, all the Black associations that kind of popped up over the course of the summer. Also, in lieu of what happens this summer, you know, it's kind of hard not to see the linkage between the George Floyd murder and, you know, all the Players Association. So where do you see these, you know, the MLS, Black Players Association, USL Black Players Association, NWSL, Black Coalition, where do you see those organizations going in the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
I think if managed right and they stick to the vision, it can definitely go far. You know, the goal, I want to say probably for all three in particular, is mainly to obviously correct the whole racial inequality, definitely implement more diversity from the players amongst like teammates, as well as the hiring practices of these leagues, like hiring more, just really placing that emphasis on diversity. And when we say diversity, we're not talking about just hiring one African American or hiring one Latino or Latina, but even hiring, you know, folks from Asian background, just other minority ethnicities, and hiring them not because of the color of their skin or to meet the quota, but because they are qualified. And so I think that's something that you're going to see a lot of. The educational side is really figuring out, implementing educational courses, workshops, things on how to really decipher between a qualified candidate, not based off the color of their skin, but because of their work. You know, really looking at these head coaching jobs within MLS, within USL, within NWSL. NWSL only has one woman head coach now. I mean, Utah Royals, like, she's not really a head coach, but you know what I mean. It's like an acting head coach. And then on the GM side, you only have two women at NWSL, and not one African American coach, not one Latina coach. Come on now. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done within that. And then obviously with MLS, we already know what that is. USL has a pretty good amount, but we could always use more. So all of these different associations, that's, like I said, if it's managed correctly and they stick to the vision, it's definitely going to grow and make a huge impact, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch too, especially just in the community. I mean, so I'm looking forward to seeing all of that.
Yeah. And I mean, like you were talking about like some of the challenges that meets of having these teams not having a Black head coach, Black owners, or Black leadership. You know, speaking of yourself, your own experience, what are some of the challenges of a female, is most especially a Black woman, looking to become an agent? You know, what are some of those challenges?
So what I found out on my journey was that I ended up becoming like the first African American female soccer agent in America. And at first I was like, oh, that's cool. And some people were like, you're not excited about that? Like, of course I'm excited, but I care more about the work that I'm doing. I care more about what comes after. Because see, being the first is great, but your impact isn't made until there's more people after you.
Mm-hmm.
So in about maybe 5 to 10 years, my reaction is going to be a little bit different. But it's a challenge. You have to understand that you're coming into this space. It's a male dominated space. It's not just a male dominated space, but it's a space where, there's not many of us. There's not many of women or men of color in these positions as agents. And so when you're coming in, you need to come in and own your shit. You need to come in and know your business. You need to know who the key players are, from the agents to the agencies to the clubs, the scouts, the sporting directors. It's a crazy business. It's a lifestyle for me. It's not a part-time job. This is my full-time job. I run my company and I'm an agent full-time. So I don't know anything else but this. And
Yeah.
I'm not in it for one short term or one short payday. I'm in it, maybe about 10, 20 years I'm in this for. So you got to be dedicated. You got to be persistent. You got to be hungry. You got to want it. You got to know your business, and you got to also find your niche. If your niche is going to be to work with women, study that. Know who the gatekeepers are within the women's space. Understand and figure out how you're going to recruit these players. Understand how you're going to connect with coaches and teams and leagues, and figure that out. So it's a challenge. It's not easy. Had a couple of women tell me recently they wanted to be agents, but I'm like, do you know why you want to do it? They're like, oh, I see
Yeah.
you doing it. I'm like, do you know what the hell I had to go through to get to, what I'm saying, to where I'm at? Like, what, you think this is easy? Like, this ain't easy. This is not easy. And so every day it's a challenge for me. Any wrong move, any wrong thing I say could be,
Yeah.
but honestly, I'm grateful for my players, honestly. And that's why I signed the players that I signed. I'm very particular, very picky, because it just means everything to me to make sure
Yeah.
that our visions align.
Yeah, I heard on a recent podcast. Shout out to Hugh. Once again, I was listening to the podcast he interviewed you on, and you were mentioning how you don't pick up players unless they have some kind of community service or something giving
Yep.
back to the community.
Yep.
Why is that so important to you, and why is that so important for athletes to have?
As a first generation born American, it means everything to me. Having parents from the Caribbean and West Africa, and to see where my family grew up, really grew up with nothing, came to this country with nothing, and literally had to make something of themselves. And even where I grew up, in the inner city, I was reminded every day of how important it is to do good and give back. And I don't just give back for the moment, I give back. It's a lifestyle. You know what I mean? Like, just during COVID, there was a lot of things that I was doing. Earlier today, I went out to one of the local hospitals. It's World Premature Day, so I give back to the community there. And I'm a preemie baby, so every year I make it my duty to make sure I'm back in New York, into the hospital that I was born, Kings County, and visit the NICU and talk to the parents, and they kind of look at me like I'm crazy, because they're like, ain't no way in hell you was born a premature and this is how you are now. But all of that is a form of giving back. So it's important. And that's like one of my favorite organizations, March of Dimes. So when I'm signing a player, if that player says to me, I'm a fan of the Boys and Girls Club, that's a company that we look at and try to figure out how can we partner with them to do something, whether it's a summer camp, whether it's a Thanksgiving drive, whether it's a Christmas toy giveaway. We figure out how to do something, mainly because it's just so important. And I think sometimes with athletes, and why I make that a requirement, because at some point, even if you don't want to partner with an organization, you may want to start one yourself. And obviously that's something that Hugh has done recently. Another one of my clients, Samantha, we started something as well. And honestly, like there's no better feeling than
Yeah.
to know that like you're making an impact by just putting a smile on a kid's face who have the aspirations to be a soccer player, but because they couldn't physically see what they want to be, they now see that when they look at Hugh, or they now see that when they look at Samantha, or they see that when they look at Jameer Fields, and so it's like wow. Or if someone says they want to be an agent, and a young black girl might say, "I want to be a soccer agent." Now she looks at Maggie and Tim and says, "Okay, it is possible."
Yeah. I mean, me being an man of Alpha Phi Alpha, like we have a close relationship with marching arms and like community service. So I definitely understand it. Like,
Yeah.
I love it when I see athletes, no more or less teams, because I feel like teams kind of have to do it. But when I see athletes go out of their way and not just be stingy and be like, "Oh, it's all about me. It's all about me." It kind of resonates and lets me know like you recognize the impact that you have. That's very key to see. And it's great to see that as an agent, because I feel like sometimes agents, and it's just part of my ignorance as well. At first, like agents kind of get that bad rap of being like, "Oh, they just want the big contract. They just worry about the transfer
All
deal.
the
That's
time.
it."
I can tell
Yeah.
you that firsthand. I can tell you. I can attest to that. That I've seen that. That's their mo. I've had other agents tell me, "Don't sign a player like you because he's a USL player. He's not gonna make you no money." I've heard people tell me, "Don't sign Samantha Johnson because she's retired or she's not sure whether she wants to play in the league yet. She's coming back." I've had players tell me like Jameer is okay, but she's not. She's not a national team player.
Yeah.
Yet they don't even understand the impact of what happens just even not just on the field but off the field is so much greater and it's so much more rewarding. And I'm not talking about from a monetary standpoint, but it's just like who they are as players, as athletes, as people, and the things that they care about. That's so much more rewarding to me than chasing after a bag, because most of those agents that do decide to chase a bag with those players 9 out of 10 times, they don't have that player their entire career. They don't have that player their entire career. I've seen it. I've seen players hop around and go to different places. And I'll say this to the agents that are worried about their players coming to me, then you need to step your game up and do something different.
Yeah. It should be an
No
alert,
shade. Yeah.
Yeah.
No shade. No shade. But I'm just saying. I'm just putting it out there.
Speak your truth. Speak your truth.
Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Elliot. I know you guys are really enjoying this real unique story, but we got to pay bills around here. So, make sure we provide you guys with more unique episodes. So, the sponsor is from the Non-League America, who has been exploring the diversity of the United States through the lens of soccer since 2012. Non-League America makes documentaries highlighting ambitious clubs that are pushing the boundaries of what is possible both within the confines and just outside the system, built without their interests in mind. These clubs are building the foundation of American soccer community from the ground up. So, if you support us, go support them. Check out their latest documentary, Non-League America, Volume 15, More Than Ready, the story of Goldsboro Strike Eagles FC on Facebook or YouTube. And also make sure to follow them and Non-League USA on Twitter or on Facebook. So, with that being said, here's back to the episode.
I also want to ask you this question because you're very knowledgeable about NWSL, and I think this is how me and you connected is because like I was looking to get into NWSL. You were one of the people that reached out to me and like kind of gave me like, "Hey, look out for this. This is something you should pay attention to." With NWSL, the recent expansion of Racing Louisville and Angel City FC, correct?
And Sacramento's coming as well.
Oh, Sacramento. Oh, okay. All right. I didn't know that. All right. So 3 teams are coming in. For you as an agent, how are female soccer player contracts handled in America? But then also, like in that space of NWSL, how are you kind of circumventing your way around to be like, "Hey, look, you need to look out for this player," or telling players like, "Hey, look, this is a great team for you," things like that?
Great question. So the contracts work obviously very different from the MLS and like USL players. The contracts are a lot smaller from a monetary value, unless they're like number one pick or possibly like national team. So for those that don't know, the national team players don't get paid from NWSL. They get paid from the U.S. Soccer Federation, or unless they are from a different federation, like a lot of the Canadian players. So players like Nichelle Prince, who is from Canada, she gets paid through Canada's federation. And they're more so considered as like allocated players. And their salaries come from there, so it doesn't go against the team's budget. And then the ones that are not a part of national team, they do get paid from NWSL. The salaries are, I can't even say decent, to be fully transparent. I do feel like people that have gone to college 4 years and come out entry level most of the time, sometimes depending on even their career field, would make more than a player that's playing in NWSL. So that's a huge part of my fight, is not just being an agent to get the player what they're worth, but to figure out how to work with NWSL to help them generate more revenue, whether it's from a sponsorship side, more investment. And I feel like the more investment that's made into the league and into women's soccer as a whole, you'll then see over the years that the salaries will increase. And then as far as like women's soccer players on the college level, so this is a good example because I'm dealing with this now. So there are players that want to go through the draft. Most players, you have options to like try out for teams when they're holding trials. So there's certain players like Jennifer Cujo. That's kind of how NWSL became introduced to her. She went to a trial before the Challenge Cup earlier this year, got selected, ended up killing it in the Challenge Cup. Sky Blue offers her a multi-year contract, and now, of course, she'll be heading over to Racing Louisville. In the standard, the ones that are coming out of college, I always advise these women to stay in school, get their degree. I usually don't talk to underclassmen players because I'm very big on education, and I feel like you'll have something to fall back on. The lifespan of a soccer player can range from maybe 8 years if you're lucky, professionally. So you're better off having that degree. And especially if you have that degree, that's where those off the field projects can tie into what you went to school for and what you really aspire to be. So you can kind of have two professions. And then it's really just advising the women on, that transition from college to pro could be very scary. In college, you could have been a number one star your whole 4 years, but now you're in the pros. It's a total different ballgame. And so no matter what, whether you think you're prepared physically, mentally, it could be overwhelming. So I try to do my best to help these women make that transition, as well as talking with teams and clubs, from the league to say, like you said before, hey, look out for this player or look out for that player. And when the deal is getting ready to happen, I want to make sure that there's a common ground on both sides where the player's happy and the club is happy. Because what you don't want is just for the player to be happy and the club not to be happy. Because then guess what? Your player is probably going to end up being a nice bench warmer. Even though they may be happy and got that money, they sitting on the bench keeping it warm. So you don't want that. And when you can find that common ground where they both can meet and be happy, perfect situation.
Perfect situation is indeed. On another podcast, I think you were on Tuesdays FC. You've been around the whole black soccer, culture run. I feel like I'm the last one.
That, but
well, no. I mean, look.
Yeah, but I mean,
that just means you're a hot commodity. That just means you're a hot commodity.
Honestly, this is something new for me. I'm a behind the scenes woman. I've always been. I've spent about almost 10 years in the music and sports industry, and I've been behind the scenes just doing a lot of marketing. So for once in the soccer space, honestly, I'm just super grateful for podcasts like yours and 2 Cents and Shameless. Shirtless Plantain Show and all the other podcasts that have welcomed me on. So I, like, you guys are like my soccer family. And so I'm super grateful.
We thank you for that. But I want to ask you this question, and this is something that stuck out to me from one of those podcasts about how a lot of your players are trying to, they're sitting out, I think it was last year or this year, to try possibly make that move to go to LA or Sacramento. how do you talk to your players about that? Like telling them like, like, hey, you a senior, are you a junior rusher? How you might take the chance of sitting out this year. It might not be good, might not be great. How do you work with that?
One thing about me, I'm a fully transparent person. I'm very vocal, very outspoken. I tell the players all the time from the very beginning, this whether you're pro or college level. If you want an agent that's gonna sweet talk you, that's not me. If you want an agent that's gonna tell you what you want to hear all the time, that's not me. But if you can deal with someone that could be transparent with you and you're okay with it, then we can talk. So
Okay.
it's mainly just advising them on making the right decisions.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of just telling them straight too, like being realistic. Like, okay, if you think you're gonna go to this particular team, that's not gonna happen. Whoever tells you different is just telling you that to tell you that. No, seriously, because it happens, and I've been told that where they were told from someone else that, oh yeah, I'm gonna go here, and it's like, who told you that? Or like if they said they're going to somewhere in Europe, and it's like, do you hold another passport? Because if you don't, you're gonna be sitting right in California or wherever you're sitting. That's where you're gonna be.
So one question is there a collective bargaining agreement for NWSL when it comes to like talking about contracts or anything like that, or is it kind of just the
Nope.
Wild Wild West?
That Yep, no CBA. No CBA.
Do you feel like is NWSL going to get to the point where we are eventually going to have a collective bargaining agreement where
I think so.
Why? So let me ask this: why is there a delay in NWSL coming with a CBA?
See, that's a good question. That's a question that's gonna have to be for them. Honestly, I wish I could answer that.
Okay.
I have no answers for that.
All right.
Yeah, that one I don't know, but because that same question is like that was like one of the first questions I asked too. Like I'm like, wait, so where's the CBA and why don't you have one? And then I was told like, oh, it's something eventually, it's in the works, but I don't know.
Okay. All right then. Well, another question I want to ask you when you brought up earlier about you being a FIFA agent. You're one of the first, first or the only female FIFA agent?
No,
first
so one of.
Okay.
Global, when we talk globally, one of. But when we talk about America, first Black.
Okay, first Black. Okay. So how is that process of becoming a FIFA agent, and how difficult is it? Because I imagine it has to be like getting your PhD from Harvard difficult level.
No comment. I don't want to lose my license. No.
Oh my god.
No. For me, I was lucky because remember, FIFA was one of my clients. So I knew people in there. So a lot of my questions I could get answered directly. So the process wasn't too bad for me. There's an examination that you had to take. So prior to 2015, you had to take an exam. And then whatever your results were, if you passed, then you're FIFA license. And then you would just have to let the federation know within your country. Then they kind of like soften the rules a little bit. But now they're going to start implementing new rules again. So new regulations where everything falls back to FIFA as a whole. And then depending on which country you're in, you can be licensed in several countries. Some agents I know, they're licensed in America. They're also licensed in England, or they could be licensed in the Netherlands. You could be licensed in Italy, Spain. I think for me, the only other country that I know for sure is next up for me to be licensed in is going to be England, mainly because throughout the company we have other clients that are based in England, so it's gonna make all the more sense to do that.
Yeah, it is also that transition
of
I believe it. But we're also seeing that link between NWSL and the Women's Super League about how they're moving over to England, with a lot of U.S. women's national team players and whatnot. But you did mention you have your own agency. Trinity 3 Agency. Explain to us what is all that, what's going on with that. You also have your own podcast too, so tell us about all of that.
Oh man, so from the podcast side, we wrapped up the first season. Not sure if we're going to do a second season just yet, just because of our schedules, but I co-host that with another agent out of Canada. And it was really because you couldn't find like a lot of things that I can find in basketball and, you know, football, like as far as NFL or even baseball. I don't find a lot of that in soccer. So I felt like, man, there needs to be some type of podcast that it's giving you agent perspectives on things. And I wanted to create that. And so it was cool. And I think now, I mean, maybe in the future, I've been asked several times to do different podcasts. I'm thinking of maybe starting one with some women within the soccer space. So you may see that. You may just see myself hosting it, or I may just be like, you know, you want to partner with me on this real quick, you know? But yeah, definitely that is cool. And then, of course, with the agency, it consists of marketing. So sponsorship and partnership marketing, that's a main specialty on the marketing side. Of course, there's the charity and foundation creation area. Then there's the experiential event side, production and curation. And then there's the management. So we manage some artists as well as managing talent. So athletes, we work with different athletes within the NFL, NBA, baseball, well, MLB, and then of course soccer being the main on the field. So soccer is the only one that we handle on the field contracts for, but every other sport it's off the field for that. And yeah, and it was something that had to be created because one, my services were always in demand. Two, after going through different corporate jobs and wanting to work on the agency side, every agency I went to, I would interview for, and I was, whether it was to be a junior agent or to just be a sponsorship rep, and I wouldn't get the position. I'd get to the final round and they'd be like, oh yeah, we picked somebody that's more qualified. All that basically meant was it wasn't qualified. They just picked somebody that didn't look like me, didn't look like us. So, and that was cool because I felt like after a while, I was begging for a seat at someone else's table, and God said, listen, go create your own table and make sure with this table, you open up those seats to people that want to work with you. And that's exactly what I'm doing, and it's the best decision that I've ever made, and I love it, and I wouldn't trade it in for the world. So
wow, I don't think there's no better point to end on that, Maggie. Once again, I just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast. I mean, we wish you the best of success. You know, maybe you'll be, I mean, the way how you're going to be the female George Mendez, and you're going to be the next great super.
That's like one of the mentors right there. You know, Mendez, he's like the GOAT. You know. And I just say thank you so much for what you've created and what you're doing. You're giving back, and that's important. And then you're tapping into the community, right? So that's a good thing too.
Oh yeah, look, my dean would have it no other way, and then like me being a history major, like the main reason why the main reason why we created Can I Kick It is because, one, there's barely any knowledge on Black soccer players outside of like the big names. Like when it comes to DeMarcus Beasley, Tim Howard, of course you know them, but people don't know about like DeMarcus Beasley had his car blew up, or about how, you know, Eddie Johnson got stopped in DC subway. He got confused with someone else, like things like that. So it's like, you know, we want to talk about those stories. We want to build those stories up. And, you know, this is a podcast that's going to live into the eons of history. So Maggie, where can everyone connect with you at?
Definitely on Twitter. I'm on there a lot of times, probably ranting about something within soccer. You know that every time you follow me. We know. Sometimes I go off, and sometimes I'm just expressing what's happening, what's motivating me. So that's going to be Agent Maggie Ntim on Twitter, and then Instagram it's Maggie.Ntim, so .NTIM. And the company, you can find Trinity 3 Agency on Twitter and Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Cool. All right, Maggie, we thank you for joining the podcast. You enjoy your day, all right?
Thank you so much. Thank you.